So, this is not what I'll be talking about today. So you guys all make your stuff up.
Why don't you just tease us a little bit?
This is in the next episode.
It's going to be interesting. Coming soon.
This is also not what I will be talking about today.
That's what I came here for.
That is also.
What, everyone wants to talk about it? I'm not talking about that. It's not. I will say this ahead of time too. They could be laughing and all this other stuff, but I do want to make sure that comments and questions, if you have stuff for me afterwards, just come to me afterwards. I'm not going to do a comment question session after this, so just see me in the dining hall or something when we have free time. You guys can ask and talk about whatever you want. Yeah, it's calendar. It's not what we're going to be talking about today. This, lots of different options here. Again, not what we're going to be talking about today.
Wow, you're eliminating all kinds of stuff.
I know. So, this people have talked about and made books about and all this other stuff. Not talking about that. This one is tough.
Oh boy.
Also not what we're talking about. Yeah. And that's my message. So, now that I have everyone's attention, yes. The mastery of any of those topics and the fullness of truth and proof that you may have for any one of those things means absolutely nothing whatsoever if you don't have love. Now, as a brief introduction, this year has been extremely special because there have been messages passed, like the men's. Steve has presented a men's message, and Christina and Norm put together the teen message this year, and we all had the same root scripture. And John mentioned it too in his message. Same root scripture, and none of us consulted one another. I find that as being pretty powerful. I'm going to mention that in here.
Yes.
But I think this is, some people would say, oh, we take this and we need to improve upon it. I say, we've totally messed up in this area. And the fruit that we have in the world that we see, and the fruit that we have among us, displays that. I'm hoping that people can walk out of here with this message today. Some of it's going to be uncomfortable. Some of it's going to put you in places where you just say, there's no way I can do that. But the love that Yeshua showed us, the Yahweh shows us every day, is an impossible love. That doesn't make sense. It's completely illogical. So we're going to go with that. So now love in general is often seen as this Christian fluff word. Right? Like, you hear it everywhere. There's bumper stickers here, love is this, love is that. You go to Christian dramas in church, you go watch Christian movies, and it's just love, 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 love. And you get sick of it. Is it possible that we have become so inundated with this message that the believers in Yeshua are actually numb to what it really means? That it has become devoid of really all meaning of what it's meant. You hear, I love you, I love you, I love you. But what does that actually look like, right? So, it doesn't matter, it's easy to become desensitized to anything. You watch enough violent movies, you can be desensitized to violence. You see enough impure relationships on shows or movies, and you become desensitized to what an actual pure relationship with the opposite sex looks like. So, it's not unlike reality for us to become completely disconnected from what the truth about love is. So we need to really probe ourselves inside and decide, do I take this action when I say these words, when I do these things? Am I actually loving my neighbor, loving one another? We'll see how important that is in just a little bit. So we also have to remember that and ask ourselves the question, have we been prideful enough to assume that because we hear the message often from the Word and even read it, that we can just master it and know how to love one another without actually praying about where our faults are in it, how we've messed up. So, the image of love that we pull away from watching the world is almost the opposite of what is commanded by Yah. So it's often limited to like an unexplainable emotional feeling. That's it. It's like you love somebody, you feel this connection with them emotionally. That is not what love is really about, because that can be shared with anyone, right? Parents can share love with their children, siblings with one another, children for their parents, friends between each other. Homosexual couples can share emotional love with one another. Animals share emotional love with one another. Maybe not goldfish, but animals can share emotional love with one another. And so those types of things are, emotional love is very fickle, and it comes in waves, right? So this is why I believe I'm going to read this passage, and this tells me why this is something that we cannot rely upon and cannot move forward with when we're thinking about what it means to love one another. Jeremiah 17:5-10. Yahweh says, "Cursed is the man who trusts in man, relies on strength of flesh, and whose heart departs from Yahweh. For he will be like a bush in the desert, and will not see when good comes, but will inhabit the parched places in the wilderness, an uninhabited salt land. Blessed is the man who trusts in Yahweh, whose confidence is in Yahweh, for he will be as a tree planted by the waters, who spreads out its roots by the river, will not fear when heat comes, but its leaf will be green and will not be concerned in the year of drought. It won't cease from yielding fruit." And here's the important part. "The heart is deceitful above all things, and it is exceedingly corrupt. Who can know it?" Anyone ever loved anything you thought you loved, and it just, your heart was telling you something that wasn't true? It deceives you into thinking what you're seeing and feeling is where you're supposed to go, what you're supposed to do, the word you're supposed to say, and then tomorrow it's different, it washes away. "I, Yahweh, search the mind, I try the heart, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings." So relying upon those emotions is a very unwise thing to do, and to build our faith upon them, and to build our walk upon them, is to build our houses of faith on sand that shifts at any given time. I'll ask you guys questions here. You can raise your hand. Don't shout out anything. Any husband or wife here had times where your emotional love dwindled for your spouse? Don't, you bunch of sinners, you're liars. Yeah, right. Okay. Any children here had not so gushy, lovey feelings for your parents at any given time?
Yeah.
What about friends? What about friends with other friends? Ever been so mad that you just wanted to do a John, right? Just knock him in the jaw, break the left jaw, and push you again, break the right jaw. Anyone ever done that? Probably. I probably have friends in this room right now that have thought about doing that to me. In all seriousness. And that's fine. I mean, I probably deserved it. But, right? So,
I love you guys.
I love you too, buddy. If I waited for that to happen right now, I'd run probably. So, if we treat the others in the faith and out with love that's dependent on any emotional state at any given time, the love of Yahweh would truly never be spread in this world. It would not be seen. In knowing how deceitful our emotions can be, Yahweh really gave us the true definition of what love is in the scriptures, and it's not based simply on how we feel, but what we do. Now, I'm not going to go into the dozens of scriptures that all of us have heard 1,000 times by now as to how love is action-based, it's not just emotion. Most of the reason that we come into this faith, for instance, is that we know that love is not just gushy, mushy hugs and love and speaking kind words to one another. It's much more deep than that. So, it's based on obedience. But even so, is anyone here willing to boldly enough admit that your love for Yahweh has dwindled at certain times?
Well, there have been times.
Right?
There have been times.
So if our love for even our Creator, our Abba, can dwindle, then it's not surprising we can do it with anyone else amongst us. Right? Now, interestingly enough, Yahweh's reaction to us as a result of our shaking faith, unwavering or wavering love for Him, exemplifies exactly what love is. And we'll try to detail that as we go. So defining love is not really problematic if we were to look up a dictionary for it, so I'm not going to go into that. It's actually living it. So, how are we to love? To me, the greatest and most compelling call to love in action is, this is the theme scripture that we have repeated. It's John 13:34-35 that we all pretty much have memorized by heart or heard a dozen times by now. But let's make sure we read it, not as a bumper sticker right now, like we've seen a dozen times, but just really understand it. A new commandment I give to you. This isn't Yeshua adding to the Torah, okay? If anyone has a problem about that, then you can come see me. Then that you love one another, just as I have loved you, that you also love one another. Now, some people just stop there. That's good, you love one another, right? But look at what it's supposed to do. By this, everyone will know you are my disciples. how you love one another. It is our identity. When people look into us and see how we love one another, we're supposed to shine out Yeshua and be like, I want what they have, right? So this love is compelling, it's attractive, it's addictive. People want to see it and have it. And if we don't have that kind of love among us, it's different than what we can expect from the world. How can we expect a different reaction than what they get? How can we expect to change something in this world if we're not different than what they already have? So I'm going to ask several questions, and if you guys are willing, as I had to become willing, to glance in the proverbial mirror, I'm going to realize how screwed up you really are. And I was. All right, so if you're honest with yourself, and just think these questions to yourself. If you're honest with yourself, is there anyone in your life you can see as unlovable? And that doesn't have to be someone necessarily in this room, but it could be. And by unlovable, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to give them a hug or be cordial to them, but it's, you just can't open your heart to them. Okay? You're fearful of something happening to you as a result of you doing that.
Yes.
Is there somebody in this room that can happen? Is there somebody outside of your life right now that can happen to? Maybe their personalities are such that you just don't think you can stand being around them. Right? Have you ever written them off in your life, or written someone else off in your life, and that's it? They're scratched off the list. Have you ever thought, I'm just gonna protect my heart and not be around when they're around, or I'll just avoid any encounter with them so that I don't ever have to experience that awkwardness? What about brothers and sisters in the faith? What about people in this room right now? And don't look around because that would be kind of awkward. Here's the hardest questions I had to ask myself, and many of the teens are going to be familiar with maybe some of these questions because I went and I surveyed our youth throughout the last several months to ask them what they feel about some of these things. And it was important to get their view, and I'll explain why in a little bit. So parents and mentors in here, what about our children? What do they see when they look at you? What do they see when they look at me? What do they see when they look at the assembly? Do they see a people more concerned about finding perfect doctrine, or people more concerned about loving one another? Do they see people more concerned about the proper way to pronounce a Hebrew word, or having open hearts, open ears, and open minds to where they are in their struggles? Do they see a people more concerned about whether the earth is flat? Yeah. Do they see a people more concerned about whether we're supposed to view the new moon in Jerusalem or locally, or whether we're supposed to use barley or equinox? Do they see a people that place more importance on whether Paul thinks women can teach in the church or wear head covering or have to wear head coverings? Or do they drift off in their minds when they're in Sabbath, while their fellowship argues about the 12th time about whether Yeshua declared all foods clean? Right? How many have been in assemblies where these things are discussed?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Whether it's your own or somebody else's, these things sometimes take priority, right? Are we witnessing so many of the next generation of believers make an exodus when they're 18, they go to college, they leave, they want to be gone, because they can't see the very thing in our assemblies that Yeshua set as our identity? Instead of a selfless, empathetic, mature love for God, do they see callous, stony hearts? They don't even want to approach the adults in their group because they are expecting something to come back to them that isn't based or rooted in love. They're expecting a response that is, as Jared said, a Torah terroristic response. And who wants to go and get that type of answer when you're looking for something healing, right? Do they hear that our solutions to personality differences or relationship issues is complete avoidance rather than addressing? We just don't want to deal with this emotional issue in our group. We don't want to confront these problems, so we're just going to avoid it, sweep it under the rug, and that's how they learn then to go out in the world and do relationships, right? Do they constantly bear the weight of judgmental eyes upon them? We see Torah. Most of us came out of the church. Torah is this treasure to us, and we want to give that treasure to our children. But Anyone here feel like potentially sometimes have been overzealous in that as parents?
Yeah.
And you shove it and the parent down the children's throats, and the children are like, this is too much. It's like a fire hose. I don't want to drink from a fire hose, right? And all that's coming without the love mixed with it, right? Do they constantly hear parents and mentors demean the things that are regular in their life as being worldly? How often do our children hear the world, that's worldly, that's worldly, that's worldly? And so what do they get programmed in their mind? They're worldly people, right? Do they consistently hear, back in my day, ... as it failed, and I've said this, right? Back in my day, we didn't, we rode bikes, we didn't do this, we didn't do that. And that's true, right? I mean, like, this is one of the coolest things that was out, pagers. Pagers. You had to, like, text with, like, 911, you get your friend to call you back because it was that important. But they say, you can use back in my day as, like, a veiled condemnation of what your children are doing. Like, well, back in my day, we did this, we didn't do that. We didn't spend our time doing this thing. Do we see them as just waiting for them to stumble and fall? Do they see us as waiting for them to stumble and fall? And we've made this mistake. We're like, I say we, several of us in the fellowship, made this mistake of talking that we have this great fear that our children are going to lead and fall. And so they hear that, and how do they think about that? And I'm going to bring up Hudson, because he's the one who said that to me, and I never even thought about that. We don't give that the benefit of the doubt to them that they're going to take what they've learned and apply it. We're just assuming that because we didn't get them to keep the Sabbath exactly the right way that we feel like we're keeping it, or whatever, that they're going to walk away. And so we have this huge fear. And I mean, none of us want to see our children ever do that, right? No parent wants to see their children have to go through the struggles that we're trying to prevent them from going through. But at the same time, you could be the one that's causing them to do that. As a result of our coldness or strictness or lack of empathy, do they dread coming to Sabbath services? They just sit there in the back. I had to have a walk with my daughter a while ago and asked her, do you come just for me? You come just because we come? I was encouraged by her answers. But there's some kids that might not answer the same thing. They might just say, I don't really feel anything when I go there. I don't have a personal desire to keep the Sabbath. I'm just going because my parents are going. And that's it. Do they just see those days? Do they see the feast as more occasions to come and just hear people debate about the little doctrines, the nuances of things that we're trying to perfect in our life? But again, love is absent. Where they really need it more is they're not there. They might have very real experiences and struggles going on in their life at that time, and no one notices it. They're so focused on going from the meeting hall to the dining hall to continue discussing whether Paul's an apostle or not, that they miss the 15 youth they're walking past that have their heads downtrodden and are broken in life. They're just looking for somebody to pay attention to that part of their life. What if newcomers to our fellowships came and saw the same thing and they sensed the same thing? Oftentimes newcomers who come to the group are on heightened sense, right? Because most of them think we're nuts and we're going to be dancing around snakes anyway. So, I mean, you got people like David and Maggie who came in an escape plan. So, you got that going on. Every word that is said is going to be scanned over. And so you have new believers coming in and they immediately can see a congregation that is primarily judgmental and secondarily loving. And that's wrong. Flipped. What if the one thing that's supposed to identify us to the world as disciples of Yeshua is completely absent in most cases? So, my own personal story this year, self-reflection, at Passover this year, it was just the starting of this whole thing. And there's many events that took place in that time that need to be detailed, but it really just got my mind thinking and going different places. And it's been a very transformational thing. It's been a very painful thing. I've had to look inside my own heart and realize I was really messed up. I made some messed up decisions, some messed up choices, and even though I may think that I'm right in my own mind, even though I may be right in my own mind, sometimes it's completely irrelevant whether you're right. It's relevant as to what you're supposed to convey to the people that you're in contact with at that time. And whether that is going to be fruitful, loving, and produce the same results that you're actually looking to produce. So I found myself asking myself those very same questions and weeping many times. And my wife can testify to that. Typing this message up, having to stop multiple times, and just wipe tears. She's always like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Nothing's wrong with me. I'm just weeping about this thing." So, biggest thing is of all of this is not what is love also, but who are we to love? Okay. So, Yeshua laid out the worldview in this verse. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not the tax collectors do also the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing that is remarkable? Do not the Gentiles do the same? Easiest thing in the world. Husband or wife goes up to each other in the morning, gives each other a hug and a kiss. What's the easiest thing to do? Give them a hug and a kiss back. Somebody comes up and greets you. Easiest thing. To love someone who is loving you in action is not tough. Right? It's the tough times are coming when people hate you and you still have to love them. They did something that scarred your heart in the past, in the present, a day ago, whatever it may be, you still have to love them. That's really, really hard, right? So, there's probably people here, raise your hand if you are somebody who likes mitigating as much risk in your life as possible. Yeah. Steve's over there. Okay.
Yeah.
You want to do anything you
Wanna
can
be in
in
control.
life to avoid risky situations. And it's understandable because risk involves the unknown. Risk involves something that's unstable. Risk involves something that is uncertain. When you step out and do something in risk and love, you are gambling with your heart. You're saying that there's a chance for great gain and reward on one side if you risk it. But you could also risk it and lose and be hurt the exact same way again. And so some people don't step out. They want to do that. It's understandable to do that. But I feel like that's kind of what Yeshua is addressing here, is the type of love that he extended to us was illogical. It didn't make sense. It was very risky. And but it paid off. Both positive, it was positive for us. For him, it cost him his life, right? But it's a thing that we need to consider. If we mitigate the risk for opportunities for love in our lives, loving those who we see as unlovable, then we fail to achieve that love that Yeshua had for us. So what does that love that Yeshua gave us look like? And it happened as he was dining in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners were coming and dining with Yeshua and his disciples. And when they saw it, the Pharisees began to say to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" So, to properly understand this, we need to get a better idea of what tax collector looked like in that time. Okay? So, tax collector. I'm going to put this down because I think I can by now. Tax collector in Yeshua's day, you guys are probably familiar with this. In Yeshua's day, in the first century, Israel, among many other nations, were under Roman occupation. Okay? To be under Roman occupation, under normal circumstances, the Rome would allow that nation to continue to do the religious rites that they were familiar with, their normal everyday practices. The Jews were able to do, offer sacrifices in the temple. They were able to do these things. They weren't allowed to inflict the death penalty, and obviously certain restrictions were put in place to maintain the order, right, that Rome wanted to give. But one of the things that Rome did is charge tax, road tax, poll tax, whatever it may be. The people that they were conquering or had conquered are going to pay taxes to pay for that. Okay, so cruelly, if that was their plan or not, the people that were set over those nations as tax collectors weren't typically Romans. Why would they want to raise a Roman soldier, a Roman person, to do somebody that could do their own bidding? So the Israelites were actually ones that were called to be tax collectors over their own people. Now, consider this for just a second. You are living in a town, and one of your brothers or sisters, probably brothers, is appointed or chose, because their moral character maybe is a little less than everyone else's, I'm going to take this opportunity and line my own pockets. But by doing so, they're taking food out of your children's mouth. They're plundering your inheritance that was passed down by your fathers and your fathers' fathers. They're stealing it from under you to line their own pockets. They live in the palaces. They wear the good clothes. And all that stuff is essentially yours that they've stolen from you. So they were, needless to say, tax collectors were despised. I mean, the New Testament is rife with examples of where You said New Testament's, the tax collectors are horrible. The early Jewish writers actually said that you were permitted to lie to them, and they were considered unclean, like pork, right? So that's how bad it was. Now, we have a really good example of this situation that I believe shows Yeshua's love in action in the New Testament. We're going to read it because the account's not that long. And he entered and traveled through Jericho, and there was a man named Zacchaeus, and he was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was seeking to see Yeshua, who he was, and he was not able to as a result of the crowd, because he was short in stature. And he ran on ahead, climbed up into a sycamore tree so he could see him, because he was going through that way. And when he came to the place, Yeshua looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down quickly, because it is necessary for me to stay at your house today. And he came down and quickly welcomed him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all began to complain. He's gone in to find lodging with this man who is a sinner. And Zacchaeus stopped and said to the master, Behold, half of my possessions, Lord, I am giving to the poor, and if I have extorted anything from anyone, I am paying it back 4 times as much. And Yeshua said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is the son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save those who are lost. So, I've got to step back, piece this through just really quickly with the Middle Eastern culture in mind. Okay? Verse 2 obviously points out that he was rich. He became rich by stealing from his own country. Okay? From a viewpoint of those in Jericho, this man was a betrayer, a treasonous man who extorted them, and in their opinion probably deserved death as a result. So would a person that was walking through a crowd, another not so morally happy person, if they saw Zacchaeus and a crowd of people just take a shank and, I don't know, it's an assumption, but these people did not like him. And it's evident in the fact that they reacted to Yeshua's treatment of him very negatively. Like, why in the world is Yeshua treating this man in this way? Later in the story, we see that in verse 8, Zacchaeus actually went above and beyond what a normal tax collector would do and totally extorted his people on top of it. So, upon hearing that Yeshua was going to pass through Jericho, Zacchaeus just had to see him. There's something that compelled him. He surely heard of Yeshua and his miracles and the way he moved around and did things in the land at this point. So, under any other normal circumstances, a person of great stature, of respect or honor in a Middle Eastern society would have absolutely no problem making their way through a crowd. I mean, they would be expected to have the front row seats to things like this happen. Hey, come on, come see this elder, come see this miracle worker that's coming into town. Come on, But Zacchaeus didn't even try. He just ran ahead. He didn't want to go through the crowd. He didn't want to say, hey guys, let me through. In the process of doing this, he actually broke several things that were culture and cast shame upon himself. Running in the Middle Eastern culture as a man, especially if his wealth, was shame. He brought shame upon himself. He didn't care. He obviously wanted to see Yeshua enough. Rich men don't climb trees. Right? He climbed a tree. He made it his goal. He was like, I'm going to see this man. Something in him compelled him. And interestingly enough, Yeshua was compelled, didn't even stop. It would have been abnormal in that culture for a man of such repute as Yeshua is to not submit to the hospitalities that a town like Jericho would have wanted to lavish upon him. Come, stay in our best person's house, eat the best of our food. Let's wash your feet, let's give you a back massage, you turn on some tunes or something like that. So, but that he never took that up. He's like, Yeshua's on a mission. Walked straight through and found Zacchaeus. But here's an example of what we can see in.
We are very close to one of the most important places for every Christians. Don't look at me, look at the tree. Because you can see the sycamore tree. And if you remember, this is the highway that Jesus used when he came from the north, from the Sea of Galilee to Jerusalem. And so many people wanted to see him. One of them was a tax collector by the name of Zacchaeus. Then he climbed the sycamore tree, and you can actually now see Jesus walking that street, and he stopped just like you, very close to here, and he saw Zacchaeus on the tree and said, Zacchaeus later on donated half of his property to the poor and promised to be better.
In that culture, it was not the tradition for the guest to choose where they stayed. It was the people of the town that chose, so that they knew, because the guest that comes doesn't know the best person's place, right? The house with the most deluxe couches and the big screen TV and all that other stuff. They didn't know that. So Yeshua comes, and instead of tradition, he just shouts at him and says, "Come on down, man. We'll stay at your place." And in modern lingo, it might be something like, "Yo, Zacchaeus, get your butt down here. We're going to roll over to your crib and chill and eat some grub and have some awesome combos," and then somebody makes a TikTok video on it and sends it out to everyone else. Nothing. So later, though, Zacchaeus was moved by such a compassionate, self-sacrificing love. Yeshua sacrificed his reputation with those people. They wanted something else, and they didn't get it. He sacrificed that and vowed to do with his most prized possession, his money, something that would have otherwise been unthinkable in that culture, especially for a tax collector in his stature. He gave half of his stuff away to the poor and made restitution in great numbers to those whom he extorted. So imagine now this repentant man, this penitent man, who would have never been willfully penitent had he been rebuked. He had to make the choice himself, right? That love had to be poured upon him first in order for him to understand that he needed to make that choice. If he was commanded to do so, you need to go pay this stuff back, no real interchange would have been sparked inside Zacchaeus. Or nor permanent change. It would have been like, okay, he's telling me to do it. It's like your child. You tell them to go wash the dishes, and they're like, okay, do they remember to wash the dishes the next time? Probably not. Until it's their own house. And then they tell their children to wash the dishes. But he gave half of what he owed to the poor. Now imagine this Zacchaeus walks up to your door. You're so upset, you're so angry, you have your last penny, and you know that you got to go pay it to him, or the Romans are going to come knock on your door. You hear a knock, ding, 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 and instead it's this man Zacchaeus. But he doesn't look the same. His countenance is noticeably different because he's been broken, he's been humbled. And instead of wanting to extort you, he humbles himself. And he says, "What I did to you is absolutely horrifying. I'm so sorry." And then he says, here's all that I took from you, and then some. Now, would such a love that was extended to Zacchaeus transform that city? Yeshua didn't turn away from him. He could have chosen to judge him, to condemn him, but instead he loved the most unlovable person among them. That's what real love looks like. So, what can that accomplish? This is in Proverbs. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. Now this verse is quoted twice more in the New Testament. But yeah. The second one, which is James 5, is the most poignant to me. "My brothers, if anyone among you should wander away from the truth and someone turns him back, he should know that the one who turns a sinner back from the error of his way will save that person's soul from death and will cover over a great number of sins." Now it seems awkward that you could say it's covering over a number of sins when there's no blood sacrifice, there's nothing like that, right? So what does this mean? The word cover there actually means to cover over with a blanket, or to veil in some way, or to hinder the knowledge of something. So love for one another can result in sins and transgressions against one another to be totally moved out of sight and forgotten. Zacchaeus had that experience. Can you guys think of Zacchaeus in your life? This isn't some gushy-gushy New Testament concept that doesn't exist in the Old Testament either. Here's a good example that we get from Proverbs as well. "The hearts of the righteous meditate faithfulness, but the mouth of the ungodly answers evil things. The ways of the righteous men are acceptable with," in the Hebrew would say Yahweh, "and through them even enemies become friends." Through the ways of the righteous, enemies become friends. Oh. When a man's ways please Yahweh, he makes his enemies to be at peace with him. Right? Excellent. If your enemy's hungry, give him food to eat. It doesn't say if your enemy's hungry, slash him through the sword or whatever. I mean, that's the normal reaction, right? Do what I can do to just never touch them. Your enemy who's against you, who's fighting against you, whose goal is to destroy you, is hungry, give him food. If he's thirsty, give him water. For you will heap coals of fire on his head, and God will reward you. That's quoted in the New Testament somewhere by Paul. I don't know where it is. Love is transformation. Personal note, in the past, I made a horrible mistake one time against a brother in the faith. And days went by of torment before anything was said. And finally it came a time where it needed to be confessed. And what happened would have completely merited me having a John done to me. My jaw being broken. And that's fully what I expected. I mean, in all seriousness. But after that, he called me outside. He said, "Adam, come here. This is my expectation. My expectation was this is," and I was like, ready for it, right? He said, "This is what I'm expecting." And the guy could have totally broken my jaw easily. So we go out and step outside the door, close the door behind me, and he starts turning towards me. And I actually kind of stepped back. I'm like, I'm going to at least brace for it, right? So I'm going to go through the window. And he hugged me. That was his reaction to embrace me. I mean, the biggest hug I could think. And at that moment, every single sin that I could think about that related to that just melted away. It was covered. Healing took time in the various areas of life and all the situations surrounding. But the actions there covered a multitude of sins to me. And it could have gone very differently. But that brother was Yeshua to me in that moment, and I needed him really bad. And so we can be that to each other as well. So the people that are going to hurt you most in life are right here in this room. The people that are going to love you the most in life are right here in this room. So people within this room might have scarred others here deeply and not even known it. Can you who are currently or have been in the past hurt by someone else in this room deeply still love those who hurt you as if they didn't? Can you love them enough to show them their faults and let that healing take place? Can the world look on and see that forgiveness and love and want what you have? I don't know how in the world you were able to forgive that person. You just tell them, I love them. That's a testimony to that. Now I just want to make a really quick point for clarification so you guys don't think I'm going nuts here, but I'm not saying that a woman who's being beaten by her husband needs to stay in the house, or that a child that's being molested needs to stay there. It's all about discernment and stuff like that, obviously, but I want everyone to look to the person next to you and say, "You're messed up." No, really, look at you, you're messed up.
Yes, Lord. Well,
yeah. Fact is, truth of the matter. And husbands and wives, stop saying it multiple times. Okay? We don't need to say it once. Right? So, fact is, we're all messed up. We're all messed up works in progress. So, let's ponder some powerful examples really quick of Yahweh's love for his people and his mercy. So, let's just go through some really brief examples. Dozens of examples, but I'm just going to give a few. They complained in the wilderness after the Exodus. They just walked through the thing. Complained multiple times, right? They went away after idols, also in the wilderness. They failed to drive out the wicked nations that they were commanded to drive out, which then resulted in the worshiping of idols for generations after that. Their kings not only worshipped idols, but promoted idolatry. They offered their children in the fire to pagan gods. The valley still existed in the time of Yeshua. It's called Gehinnom, also known as Gehenna. Despite being warned again and again by the prophets, they continued to make the same mistakes. Despite hearing the words of potential blessings for them turning even at the places they were at that time. Hey, turn around right now, and I'll pour the blessings of heaven upon you. Still didn't do it. Still failed time and time again. Now, Yahweh, in his righteous judgment, exiled them multiple times. And he's really the only one in that position to make that choice of exile. We don't really have the choice, in my opinion, to make exile of our hearts necessarily either. But he did that, and any parents here actually ever discipline their children physically? Some people don't.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Good. Okay. Anyone here like me? Oh, Shane, don't get too excited now. So, has anyone here, now this is me, some people like this, some people are not. There's been times when I had to discipline my child, I knew I had to. And it hurt them. And I walked away into another room, and I shed some tears.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I hate doing that. I can't believe that the father doesn't feel the same way.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So, this is actually mentioned, I believe, in this proverb. My son, do not despise Yahweh's discipline, neither be weary of his reproof, for whom Yahweh loves, he reproves. Reproves, and even as a father reproves the son in whom he delights.
Yes.
Okay, so he could have wiped his people off the face of the earth, and would have been totally righteous in doing so. He could do it right now and be totally righteous in doing so.
Yes.
But those people and us, and many times, do everything we can do to be completely unlovable in the sight of the Father. And yet he loves us. Every time we sin, we show a lack of love for our Father in heaven. We fall short of that perfect relationship with him. And I go back then and think about the unlovables in your life. Think about how you've chosen to react to those people in those situations in the past. What if God turned from you, ignored you, abandoned you, closed his eyes, his ears, his mouth, shut his heart to you every time we sinned against him? Do you do that to your brothers and sisters in the Lord? Do you shut them out if they rub you the wrong way? Do you avoid them outright? You see them coming and like, go back in the building, go in the bathroom, something like that, and hope they're passed by. The scriptures tell us that God is love. What does that mean? It means he's the embodiment of everything it means to love. And that concludes the examples he shows in the Old Testament and in the New. He forgives the unforgivable. He blesses the undeserving, pours the rain out upon the wicked and the righteous. He stays his hand in judgment. Many times it's most deserved. Our judgment on this world is well overdue compared to what it was in their day, in my opinion. But he stays his hand because there's a reason, right? And he loves the unlovable. When you avoid those unlovables in your life, are you avoiding an opportunity to know Yah more? To know what he's like more? Is he refining you through those situations? Do you neglect to remember that however messed up you think they are, you may have looked exactly the same to somebody else. They need to treat you the same way, right?
Yeah.
Are you a one and done person? They mess you over, they screw up your life, you're scratched off the good list, that's it. I know people like that. They're not necessarily in this room, but I know people like that, and they don't have relationships with very many people. So think about those situations from the Father's perspective. Have you hurt him? Have you hurt someone he loves? Have you said something he doesn't like, believed something he doesn't believe in, or thinks he's wrong? Have you done something that he has every right to not overlook? How has he reacted to you in those situations? So, did he turn away? Did he just say, "Meh, I'm just going to be cordial to him, and I'm not going to take the time again to try to get close because it could be painful?" And it could be. It could be very risky. Despite all your shortcomings and areas for improvement, does he continue to open his heart his arms and his ears to you. All right, so I want you guys to close your eyes for just a second. No, I'm not going to have to throw things at you. No one's eyes are closed yet. Close your eyes for just a second. And I want you to put yourself just for a moment in a first century synagogue. Not that anyone knows what that looks like. Put yourself in a first century synagogue, and a man walks in, and everyone just gets quiet. And they know by nature who this person is. They know it's Yeshua. This is a Messianic assembly in the first century, and they've done what we've done in our day, and they've grown cold in their love for one another, and the love, the identity that they were to have is absent. This man, who they knew was Yeshua, walks up to the front, and everyone just stops. And he says, "Woe to you, my disciples, hypocrites! For you expect others to overlook your shortcomings while shunning others for theirs. Woe to you, my disciples, hypocrites! For you ask for unearned forgiveness from the Father, yet set a price for the same upon others. Woe to you, my disciples, hypocrites! For you want the Father's healing arms to be open for you, one who has hurt him deeply, yet your arms are closed to those who have hurt you. Woe to you, my disciples, hypocrites! For while the Father draws near to you despite your weaknesses, you shun others for theirs. Woe to you, my disciples, hypocrites! For though the Father has never ceased in providing you with chances to change, you cut someone off after one mistake. Woe to you, my disciples, hypocrites! For while the Father understands your messed up work in progress, your expectation from one another is perfection. Woe to you, my disciples, hypocrites! For while the Father forgets your sins, clothes you like royalty, feeds you with the best on his table, lavishes you with gifts, and slams the door, you slam the door in the face of those who need the same from you. Woe to you, my disciples, hypocrites! For while you have done everything to be unlovable to the Father, he still loves you and does not withhold his love from you. Okay, you can open your eyes. Guys, love is transformational. Absolutely transformational. Love is addictive. All right, so I'm going to go through some of these probably more quickly, but I want to give some examples, hopefully some things about what love really is that you might not have thought about before in ways to look at these scriptures. This is a bumper sticker scripture, among many others, right?
Yes.
Okay. So think about this for a second, different views. This doesn't just mean you're supposed to be patient when your food is an hour late from the Mexican restaurant, which happened to me a couple of weeks ago. Very aggravating. Doesn't mean you're supposed to be patient when your child does something you don't want, or you're angry with your spouse. The love aspect of patience is actually one of the most difficult things to learn. Because what it means is that you have to be willing for someone else to hurt you again and again while they're working on their messed up area. So somebody may have a weakness, and that weakness happens to be the place that they inflict injury to you. But they're messed up, right? Just like you're messed up. Your weakness may be in inflicting a wound upon somebody else. And an extension of love through patience is allowing those things to happen, even if it's many more times. But you don't let that affect you. You say, that person's speaking out of a place of weakness, right? And we build them up. If everyone turned away from them from that place of weakness, there'd be no one left to help them, right? You haven't been purified yet, neither have they. And your love for them in those particular situations, in those areas of weakness, may be what the refining fire is for them. Love is kind. Anyone gone through Chick-fil-A's drive-thru and you say thank you and they say my pleasure, and by the time you leave you're like, oh, is it really your pleasure? I mean, you've said it 12 times before. But sometimes a kind word can truly just make somebody's day.
Yes.
They are having a horrible, horrible time. And maybe even hearing my pleasure from Chick-fil-A just says, I just needed to hear something to make my day turn around. So patience, a healing word, a kind word can be like a healing salve in something like that. It's at times, and this is what's difficult as well, those people that you don't like, that you don't love, that are unlovables in your life that have hurt you in the past, need a kind word from you. Right? You never know what that's going to change. You never know. It's hard to do. Practice makes perfect. We all need to struggle with it. But love can take on a whole new definition for that person in that day. All right. Another one is love is not jealous. I'm not going through every piece of these, but I'm giving you most ones. Anyone been jealous of anything for anyone?
Oh, well. You know that.
Okay. Good. Being jealous of one another is easier than it seems, especially if you're somebody who, for example, let's say that you've had to fight for everything in your life. Nothing comes easy for you. You scrap, you fight for all the food on your table, for every possession that you've ever gotten. It's a battle all the time. And one of your closest friends just gets it laid out on the table for them, right? That's a really easy place to get jealous. I've had that before. I've been jealous in that area before. And so what the proper understanding of that type of jealousy is to realize that you're envying what is best in their life, but neglecting the treasure that he has for you. That's not, what they have is not the best for you. Because you don't want what they have. It wouldn't be the best. It'd be trash to you. You need the treasure that he set apart for you. Steve and Norm have been very helpful in me realizing that aspect of not being jealous, because they're always very praiseworthy to Yahweh for when they hear blessings being poured upon anyone. And so it's a good example. It's a good example for me. So we need to refocus our brains into what envy really means in that area. All right, let's see what's the next one. Love does not behave disgracefully. So this word is actually grouped together in the Old Testament with the word naked many times. Like, it doesn't, like if somebody's disgraceful, it's because they were naked with their father-in-law Ham and all that other stuff, right? But, so this basically says that love is you're gonna be conscious of the actions that you take that could bring shame upon you, that could bring shame upon your family, that could bring shame upon Yeshua and the assembly. Could be understood as simply saying that you're supposed to present yourself to the world in a comely manner, but I don't think that's what it's supposed to be. Let me ask you this. Has anyone here ever seen a brother or sister do something so shameful that you really didn't even want to associate with them? Yeah. Has anyone ever been that brother or sister? Right? So love, true love, has to be able to look past those things, press through the crowd like Yeshua did, and seek the ones that are lost, and let them know that love, that issue is not reflective of what Yeshua is. All right. Let's see. Love does not seek its own. So, who has ever been the one to take the last brownie at fellowship? Yeah. Obviously, I'm joking, but not really, because I know there's a bunch of sinners out there that are not raising their hands right now. All of us have done it, seriously. So, think about it for a second, seriously. If you're the first one in the chow line, but you don't show up to clean the dishes, I mean, that's putting yourself first. That's not showing love to your brothers and sisters. Other people got to pick up the slack, so that's not treating others as you want to be treated, right? Is the first thought in your mind to help yourself? Are you more concerned about hanging out with your friends sometimes than helping your parents and staying back and helping them when they need help? Or you have plans to go out and do things with family or with friends, and you have somebody that's desperately in need, and you're like, I can't not do this. So the defiance of love in certain instances also extends to our own ways and our understandings of Elohim. Do you only show up for service when you agree with everything that's being taught? Do you only show up if the people that you like are going to be there? What if Yeshua only showed up when everything perfect was being taught? Just imagine if Yahweh would have sent his spirit among his people if everything was right. And we'd never see anything. Love is not provoked. Modern ways probably put it as Jared put it in her message. Love is not triggered. It's probably the way to understand it. Adults, ever seen a child doing something so silly your first reaction was to yell at them? What if God did that to you each time? Kids, have you ever heard anyone speak badly about you, and your first reaction is to internalize it and not to bounce it off or whatever? Those things have long-term outcomes that can be very destructive, so we need to make sure that we don't allow provocations from other people to injure us. All right, so this next one's a big one. Love does not keep a record of wrongs. This is really, really hard sometimes, especially if somebody's hurt you very, very deeply. Anyone here ever known any grudge holders? Yes. Anyone here brave enough to admit you've ever been a grudge holder? Okay. Thank you for doing that. That's actually great to do that. Any husbands ever held anything in memory against your wives? He's the only sinner in this room. Okay. All right. Wives for your husbands. Right? Wives for your husbands. Right? Any children here been hurt by their mother or father and said, I'm just not going to forget that. Next time something comes up, I'm going to remember that. What about your friends? Anyone ever had that for your friends? Have you or do you currently have anything in your heart right now against any of your friends, any of your brothers? Have they hurt you in some way that you plan on letting you affect your relationship with them forever? In virtually all these situations, the simplest solution to ask ourselves is, what would Yeshua do? It seems very cliche. Everyone wore, like, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 years however long ago, everyone wore a WWJD bracelet, whatever. But the concept started out pure. It's meant to be really to get you to think about that, and it just became a fad, like most things do. So just imagine if they held a grudge against us and withheld their love from us because of our pasts. Anyone think you'd have a relationship with them right now? No. What if they maintained a record of our sins as an excuse to never come and be with us?
Well,
our actions and consequences, obviously, our actions actually have consequences. Some of them end up being eternal, depending on what mistakes you make, what sins you commit in this world. Reaping what we sow is natural, but Jeremiah said as a part of the new covenant that those sins were going to be forgotten and remembered no more. So we need to try to do the same with those records of wrongs and give the benefit of the doubt, as difficult as it may be. That's the impossible love that doesn't seem possible or logical. And most of the situations that I've seen this impossible have to be enacted is in situations that you're not prepared for. And I think that's good, because in those times that you're not prepared, Yahweh just says, okay, now I'm going to make you prepare. I mentioned this to some people, and I think I mentioned it briefly, but there was a brother that came, Sal. What's his name? Sal? North Sal, right? He's 70-year-old, I think, and he came to our assembly, I don't know, a few months ago, and he told us about how he was in his home. No, he was in his neighbor's house, I think. His son's house, and which was right next door, I believe, right? No, okay. Well, he was in his son's home or something like that, and while he's gone, some people came to his house looking for him, if I remember properly. How about you tell the story, Norm? No, really, like seriously, what's the basis of it?
So the guy's name was Sal, and he was visiting his son's house. And his son, his daughter-in-law, and his wife were all in the same house together. And do you want me to keep going, or you want to?
Yeah, no, go on, keep going.
His son had an altercation with a neighbor, and the neighbor came at that time with a shotgun and took out his entire family. And they were hunting him down in the house. This happened in our hometown, and it was a triple homicide. Sale was outside of the house, and when he went around the back after he heard the gunshots, the guy had gone out in front, hunting him down to shoot him as well. And when he got to his son was giving his last breath, and he said, "Run, Dad, run." And so Sal went back out the back door and ran, because the guy would have killed him too.
Okay, now fast forward a couple months, right? I don't know how long in the future, and Sal was in the courtroom, right? He was in court, and he said something. He wrote a letter, or he said something to the people that was faced with that, if I remember correctly, right?
He forgave the man.
He openly stood up and forgave that man, like in open court, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a hard one.
I mean, imagine, any of the children, just imagine if you walked into a room and saw your wife and your children in that situation. What's your motive going to be? You'd see red for like the rest of your life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if Sal sat and contemplated for months or years or how long it take to get to that point to prepare himself to be able to love in that way, or if at that moment he was given the love he needed by the Father to extend that to others. But one way or another, that's an impossible love to me.
Yeah.
That makes no sense. It's completely illogical.
Yeah.
But could you think of any better example of Yeshua being displayed to every single person in that courtroom and to that person? For all we know, that love, as much as that person might deserve to die or that penalty, whatever it may be, that love might have changed that person's life. Who knows, right? Okay. This is pretty simple. Love doesn't rejoice. If you see something wrong going on, you don't want to rejoice with it, right? This one's interesting. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love, it doesn't mean love believes all things like you believe that pigs poop rainbows or something like that, right? Love gives the benefit of the doubt. It says, you come to me, you might have hurt me, but you give the benefit of the doubt. What's that thing that Reagan said, trust but verify kind of thing or something like that? Extend the benefit of the doubt and act like you're loving them, and then let that, be gentle. Okay. Love hopes even in the most difficult outcomes are possible. Love doesn't abandon one another, even if wounds were inflicted. Love allows room for healing even when it seems impossible. And this is a big one. Love never fails. Healing can take time, but love is a supernatural gift that we have. To me, I'm going to find my page here. The most prominent example of love in this way that we have is the parable of the prodigal son. And I think that this view of love is often skewed and it's seen in a different way. I want to listen to this song on the because it's really big.
Now the only thing I feel
that son chose to willfully leave the blessing and protection of his father. And to squander all his inheritance on useless, fruitless, and lustful things of this world. I want you guys to close your eyes one more time. I'm going to give you a picture. And it's going to be harder for children to picture because they don't have children yet. Try to imagine maybe one of your parents in this situation. You are at your home, and your child or your parent who you love dearly walks up to you and says, "I'm done with this life." And they just say, "I'm done. Just give me what's mine, and I'm out of here. I just can't stand this anymore. I'm out. This just isn't for me, and I got to go out there." You're hurt. You're hurt deeply. Not that you did anything wrong at all, but you're injured in your heart. So, as a loving parent, this is way before cell phones, way before anything of that. You got to be asking yourself, is he okay? Constantly worried. Is he okay? Does he have food? Does he have shelter? Will I ever see him again? If I do see him, what will it become of him? Each passing day, your hope, you're working in the field, you're doing some sort of work, and you take a little bit of time each day to pull yourself up and look at the horizon and just think, maybe I'll see him coming today. Maybe today's the day that he'll walk. But day by day, your hope diminishes because you never see it. But you maintain that hope and you keep looking. Until one day, your hope is fulfilled. You see your son, downtrodden, desperate, beaten down by life, and weeping, walking slowly to your home, hunched over in shame as though the weight of his burdens actually strapped to his back. He's expecting what he knows he deserves, holding out even just the slightest little hope for a glimmer of goodness. What would you do as parents? Would all of your son's disobedience, the pain he caused you, the torment he put you through, the inheritance he squandered, would all that mean anything at that time? Would it even come to mind? Or would you run, as this father did, to embrace your son, to weep with him, to kiss him, to make up his room, cook him the best dinner, his favorite meal? This parable is, you guys can open your eyes, this parable is about the love of the Father towards us, not the wayward son. Have you ever been the wayward son?
Oh, yes.
That's the example of love that we have to follow in loving one another. So, just in summary, I want you guys to contemplate a few questions and meditate on them in your prayer time today and throughout the rest of the feast. So we have plenty of time to love one another over here. Could such a love transform us? Could such a love transform the church?
Yes.
Could such a love transform the world? When you're encountered with an opportunity to love, even in the most difficult of scenarios, ask yourself, what would Yeshua do? Take a pause. Don't just, in your mind, let it be a slogan. What would Yeshua do? What would Yahweh do in this situation? Better yet, ask yourself these questions. Is your standard of forgiveness higher than theirs? How would you plead with Yah to treat you in those times when you fall short with Him? Is this wrong done to you something that can be covered, hidden by love? Healing may take time and patience. Nothing's immediate with our weak human hearts. But the process towards healing will never begin apart from Yah, apart from the embodiment of love. People here that have had wounds, myself included, from others that have inflicted them upon you, do you want healing from those? Then you have to love them. You want to experience love from others when you fall short and screw up. You need to love them. You want to be free from prisons of grudges and resentment that keeps your heart in prison. You love them. You want to know the heart of Yah in your life more. Love them. Loving the unlovables in your life is undoubtedly going to be the most difficult thing you have to do. But where you see an unscalable mountain, Yahweh sees a gentle path, well worn. Where you see an insurmountable barrier, He sees you dancing on the other side. Where you see the impossible, Yahweh sees it already accomplished. No matter how much you know about Paul, no matter how well you know to pronounce the name of God, no matter how much proof you have for your form of the calendar, no matter how educated you are, no matter how much history you know, none of that matters if you look like trash to the world. None of that matters if you look like trash to the people around you. Do you want to lead people to Yahweh? Do you want to see the world transformed? Do you want to look more like Yeshua, love one another? Don't just pray for it. People say pray, let's just pray more, let's just pray more. No, you have to do it.
Yes.
Even when it seems impossible, love one another. Tzvi said this yesterday in the Rev Shabbat service. Sometimes you just got to do it, and then let the rest come, and do it in faith. It might not make sense. It won't make sense in the hearts. Love one another even as He loves you. And you'll see your burdens shed. You'll see your healing completed. You'll see people desiring what you want. And you'll see the world transformed. There's one last thing I want to do, and this is totally free will. This is not part of, this is the end of my spoken message. But when Christy and I were growing up in the youth group, we used to do this thing called bread breaking. I don't know if anyone else is familiar with this. This is not something that's like I'm pulling out of John chapter 29. This is just a thing that we did. Breaking bread with one another in the scriptures is in that culture was a very intimate thing. It showed a relationship between you, and to break bread with someone, that table was clean. So I have bread. If there's people in here that need to break bread with somebody else in here, now's the time to do it. Clean hearts, clean minds, and you'll find that the healing comes. So if you guys want to do that, if somebody needs to break bread with me, I'm good with that. You can take some chairs, you can get some bread. I even have tongs so you don't have to touch it. Foresight. And that's it.
Do you want us to play some music while
I have actually something played on a little playlist to keep up here.
Thank you, Adam.
Love you guys. Thank you.